Thank you, Nikhil, for giving me this opportunity. It's been wonderful looking at, listening to the sharing of experiences by so many of our alumni, and very, very happy to belong to this elite group. So, we are facing, we are operating in challenging times. So this morning, as I was cooking, the electricity went off. I said, so what's going to happen to this webinar if there is no electricity? 1 week ago, there was no water. So then I started looking at what are our needs. Do we need, is water more important? Is electricity more important? The car battery ran down, so is the vehicle more important? Then I realized, talking about government, when people want everything, that is what government is about. They want electricity, they want water, they want street lights running, everything. Nothing can fail at any moment, and something is bound to fail, like what we are facing now. So just a little brief introduction about myself. I come from a highly non-government background. My family, I grew up in Chennai, studied in Chennai, then went abroad to study, absolutely no government background. I was doing my PhD in pure sciences, organic chemistry to be precise, in the United States at Ohio State University. Then I took a leave of absence to come back and write the civil service exam, and then landed, first got allocated to Maharashtra cadre, and joined as an assistant collector in Nagpur. When I landed in Nagpur, I found it was just an overgrown village. I was coming from the US. I had grown up in Chennai, which was then Madras, and a small town, smaller town than today. But I was not prepared for Nagpur. So that is my beginning. But back more of that later. Now, we've been talking about ethics a lot, and I remember Blaze's presentation, which was mostly on ethics. And I hear a lot of comments on corruption, and that is there. But is government totally divorced from ethics? Actually, this is going to be my outline, but it's more of experience sharing. As I said, I shifted from being a scientist to an administrator because my father was a scientist and he was in teaching and in science. And I actually saw corruption there, and I said, if I have to deal with corruption and I have to deal with politicians and politics, I'd rather deal with it upfront as an administrator rather than being a scientist and having to deal with it. And having joined government, there are a couple of things that I would just like to point out, which are the high points or the good points about government. It's an equal opportunity employer, does not distinguish male and female at the time of recruitment, at the time of also promotions. Okay, it's time scale promotion, but you have an equal opportunity. Of course, it doesn't mean you have an equal opportunity for postings, because some postings are seen. There are something called hard postings and soft postings. Hard postings are seen as urban development, irrigation, infrastructure, power, etc. And soft postings are something which are called Women and Child Development Department, Health, Education. And in my opinion, these so-called soft postings are even more difficult to achieve because of the complexities than the hard postings, which are more infrastructure oriented. Number two is work-life balance. It still, until recently, I'm not sure at the moment it is offering, but until recently, maybe until a couple of years ago, it offered an opportunity for good work-life balance. Government of India is extremely proactive in that sense. For example, going back to equal opportunity employer, I would like to state one fact, which is, I don't know how many of us are aware, that Air India was a public sector company, was the very first commercial airline to employ women pilots on its force and actually give them operational roles. Very first one, and in fact, the senior most one retired a couple of years earlier. That's how women friendly it can be. Not always, but it can be. Now coming to other things, if maternity leave government gives you, it gives even paternity leave, which very many organizations don't give. It gives child care leave. These are things which are very important for you not to burn out, because there are fields in which people do extremely well. They go up the ladder very fast, but there's a burnout, whether you're man or women. The last point comes back to lets you be, which is there is corruption. Now, 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago, when I joined, if you asked how much was the corruption, we were told maybe about 15% are corrupt. Now, as time went by, and I think it is also a reflection of society, the corruption increased and now there is corruption. But if you want to remain uncorrupted, you don't want to be part of that supply chain of corruption, it is possible. And that is why I said it lets you be. Very, very important for people who are very focused on, who are very sensitive to this. Now, what is government to me? Government is the art of reconciling opposites at any point in time. So I would like to see whether I can play this video. Yes.
And this is J Theatre.
This is a video from Yes Minister.
How much do all this cost?
Together with radiotherapy and intensive care, $2.25 million.
Doesn't it appall you that it's not being used?
Oh, no. A very good thing in some ways. Prolongs its life, cuts down running costs.
But there are no patients.
No, but the essential work of the hospital still has to go on.
Aren't patients the essential work of the hospital?
Running an organisation of 500 people is a big job, Minister.
But if they weren't here, they wouldn't be here.
What?
No, Mrs. Rogers, it won't do. Either you must get some patients into this hospital, or I shall close it.
Yes, well, Minister, in the course of time...
No,
I'm
not in the
sure-
course of time, Mrs. Rogers. Now, get rid of 300 of your people, get some doctors and nurses, and get some patients.
Now,
in.
look here. Without those 300 people, this hospital just wouldn't function.
Oh, you think it's functioning now?
Minister, it's one of the best-run hospitals in the country. It's up for the Florence Nightingale Award.
And what, pray, is that?
It's won by the most hygienic hospital in the area.
No, Mrs. Rogers, I've said my last word. 300 staff must go.
You mean 300 jobs lost?
We couldn't do any serious surgery with just a skeleton medical staff
Well,
anyway.
don't do any serious surgery. I don't care if you only do varicose veins, hernias, and piles. Do something.
Do you mean 300 jobs lost?
Yes, I do, Mr. Fraser. A hospital is not a source of employment. It is a place for...
Okay. You know, what I wanted to convey there was the art of reconciling opposites. It is running a hospital. Is it for healthcare? Is it for employment? And there are so many people employed behind the 300. And today, in the context of coronavirus, we are looking at life versus livelihood. Do we focus on life or do we focus on livelihood? And this is how it goes in government. Do we look at the interest of urban people or rural people, interest of infrastructure or tribals? So these are the compelling reasons of both sides, and this is the constant conflict situation in which you work when you frame policies, because they are equally opposing forces 90% of the time. So when I was working in Chandrapur, this was a real conflict area, and the images I showed, these are not images of Chandrapur, but these are images I have seen. Chandrapur was the setting of Upmanyu Chatterjee's book and film, English August. And while I was working there, I remember one day I came back home past midnight from a tour into the interior areas. It was 150 kilometers from Nagpur, and when you go, it's another 150 kilometers into the interior. And when you went on tour, you carried your food, you carried your stuff, you carried your people. But because of Naxalite activity, you also had to take with you a jeep, escort jeep filled with 6 10-gun policemen. And the conflict in my mind was, if you go with the police, you can't do development work because the people were anti-police and anti-forest people. And if you did not go with the police, you were not abiding by government instructions, and they could just pull you up. So one of those days when I came back from tour, I found this strange man walking up and down outside the bungalow. And I had to call up the superintendent of police and say, I find this a strange man. I have taken out everybody, every single staff from my house, because I don't know who is a Naxalite, and who is the staff. He says, okay, hang on, I'm coming there to explain to you. So he came there and he said, that was my man. I said, but why do you put a person outside my home? He says, because we intercepted a letter which was written in blood threatening your life, so we had to make sure that at least the minimum protection was given. And this escort jeep incident that I said, I was touring into deep interior where there are hardly motorable roads. There are no cars can go. We needed a four-wheel drive jeep. I was only with my driver, and this was the border of present-day Telangana, then Andhra Pradesh. I was visiting a primary health center. It was sundown time, and suddenly my driver told me in Marathi, it says, "Mala kasatari vatta apan jauya." I'm feeling uneasy. Can we go? At that point of time, I said, okay, maybe he's not well, and since I don't have anybody else with me, I have to, actually listen to him. If he's not feeling well, I can drive a jeep, but I have to go. So we just came down to the plains, and I was night halting in the Naxal affected area. 7:30 was, everything was closed. And 8 o'clock at night, I got a bang, bang, the door. And then I said, but I called for my driver, but the driver didn't answer. So I thought maybe this is the Naxals who have actually taken my driver hostage. And now I don't know who's outside. I said, what do you want? He says, police. Now, how do I know he's a police? I finally opened the door, but even after seeing the police, your antenna is up when you work in such circumstances. You say he's in police uniform. There are 4 of them, but I don't know whether they're Naxals or police uniform. Now, the advantage that I had when I joined that area and the government did not want to post me there, the advantage was the Naxals of those days, they had what I would call, they were real Naxals, and they did not want a lady officer in their hands. They had actually kidnapped the neighboring districts officers, 5 of them, and one happened to be a lady, and they released the lady and said, go and negotiate with the government on our behalf. So, I said, fine, but what happened? So they said, we need a dying declaration to be taken because the police jeep was following you. And I had told them, please follow half an hour behind so that I can finish my development work. It says there was an underground mine and it got blown up, and 5 of the policemen died on the spot. And 6th one is in the hospital, and we'd like a dying declaration to be done. As I was I was the chief executive officer of the Zilla Parishad, and I did not have the power or the authority to take a dying declaration. So I had to call the police, and because if I didn't inform the police, then next day's newspaper headlines, fortunately no electronic media those days, newspaper headlines would have read, the Zilla Parishad chief could go there, but not the police. Shame on the police. And I didn't want to get into that kind of a situation. So I had to call the police on, I said, please call the commissioner on, the DIG on wireless and trace the superintendent of police and send him immediately. So these were everyday situations when I was working there for 2 years, but one of the most rewarding postings that I've ever had. But all is not bad in that Chandrapur. I was once interviewing, part of a team interviewing tribals for appointment as teacher. And this was a time that there was VP Singh government was shaky and was going. One of the students, most of the students could not answer, simple mathematical sums. Like most of the candidates who were 10th pass could not answer simple mathematical sums like 101 by 10, 501 by 5, etc. But there was this one guy who breezed through the whole thing. He knew the national state poet. He knew the poetry. He could actually annotate the poetry, everything. So we asked him, would you like to be posted in Chandrapur headquarters? He says, no, ma'am, I want to be posted in my own village. I said, why? He says, no, what my guru gave to me, I would like to give to my fellow citizens in that region. God-forsaken region even today. I said, so what did your Guruji do that you know so much? This Guruji had, he was just one guru, one principal, headmaster, and one teacher, but he would call all the students to his home. So we are talking about 1988-89, and he had a library in his home. He got newspapers which would come 1 week later from Nagpur, and he would make them read a book or a newspaper and actually discuss it for half an hour before school starts. So you have such dedicated people. They may be recognized, may not be recognized, but they are there. Now, we saw a clipping from Yes Minister. I'd like to just share a few thoughts. Many people, there's jokes about politicians. There are there are derisive comments on both politicians and bureaucrats, but more of politicians because they are in the limelight most of the time. Are politicians bad? Now, my experience with ministers, most of them, especially the successful ones who have not come through the back door because they belong to a family or they have been mentored by somebody, ones who have worked on their own, they are simply very bright. Now, short of being brilliant, they are very bright in their field. They may not be able to take an exam, they may not be able to crack a civil service thing, but they are very bright. And I found two characteristics which marked them out. One was their memory, incredible memory. And, they would remember everybody's names and never forget it. And I wondered how, but then I realized that they have to work with their karyakartas. They were party workers day in and day out. And if they don't remember those karyakartas' names, then they are not going to get any support from them. The second is their ability to connect. They can connect with a king to just this moment and with a pauper, a fisherman, the next moment. And one or two examples I'd like to share with you of how they connect or how they remember. Now, this is about Mr. Narasimha Rao, who was a Prime Minister of India when I was a who was a Defense Minister of India when I was a probationer, who was elected from Nagpur district, from Ramtek constituency. And I remember meeting him there when I had gone on my training with the police department because he was coming to do a recce. And I was standing, not knowing what to do in one corner. And after his initial recce, he called for me. He said, call that person. So when I went to meet him, he said, I said, morning, sir. So he says, you must be the probationer here. And this is something only a probationer can ask. I said, indeed, I'm the probationer, but sir, how did you find out? And he said, you're the only person in this whole crowd who looks important enough but lost enough, and that's a characteristic of a trainee officer. So look at the connect that he could do. So precise in his description of what a trainee officer is. Now, down the line, a few months down the line, I was in Chennai at Kalakshetra watching a dance program, and Mr. Narasimha Rao was there with the then Vice President of the country. And for some reason, my father said, let's go and meet the Vice President because they came from the same university. When we went to meet him, Mr. Narasimha Rao looked at me and he said, girl, aren't you supposed to be in Nagpur? What are you doing here? So that is their memory and connect. And there are several examples. Mr. Advani, I remember him getting off the aircraft when I was collector at Nagpur. I went back to Nagpur as a collector. And I had introduced myself saying, I am the collector of Nagpur. Welcome, sir. And he said, and who would you be? I thought maybe he didn't understand. He didn't hear it. So I said, I'm the district magistrate of Nagpur. Because North India, the collectors are known better as district magistrates and south of Maharashtra as collectors. He says, I heard that the first time, young lady, but you would also happen to have a name. That's how they can break the ice. Now, who is a successful bureaucrat? Again, there are these two, the memory and the connect. And I think this is not unique to bureaucrats. It could be unique to anybody. If you can remember the right things, the people. I'm not talking about figures and I'm not talking about issues, but the people, and connect with them. And the additional thing about a bureaucrat, a successful bureaucrat, which I'm not from this point of view, is if you can anticipate and read the minds of your political boss and act proactively without them prompting, then you will be the most successful officer in government. And of course, there are always, there is this thing about technocrat versus bureaucrat, but what gives the bureaucrat the edge is, I wouldn't say the edge, let me put it this way, as you move up in a career, whether it's private sector or government sector, as you keep moving up, actually your technical inputs form a lower percentage and your administrative and managerial inputs become more and more important. And I think in government, the technocrats are very, very good, but they are not trained or reoriented to have that larger canvas and perspective that is required. So one or two experiences or the result of being a simple bureaucrat who was lost at times on how to actually get things across. Um, so there was this meeting to discuss, it says sanitation, but it's actually water conservation and sanitation. So this was a drought year in Maharashtra, and I would be summoned to attend the cabinet meetings in Mumbai every Wednesday. So 3 hours of my time every Wednesday for 5 years went into this because I was in departments relating to water. And one time it was a highly drought year. We're talking about Marathwada. And I said, we need to save water, we need to build toilets, etc. He says, madam, save water. Yeah, now we have to give water to everybody. Basically, what happened was there's this huge dam called Jayakwadi Dam near Aurangabad, and they wanted to empty the water and give it to the agriculturists because they needed it. But I said, we need to save water for the drinking water. And also we need to, Jayakwadi is built to store water for 2-3 years. So we need to be careful about that. So in the course of the discussion, I was saying that, we need to save water for the future generation also. So he says, madam, आता तुम्ही आमच्या मुला मुली बद्दल बोलू नका, ते सोडा. आता आम्हाला पुढच्या इलेक्शन कसं विन करायचं, ते जिंकायचं आहे. Meaning, let's not bother about the future generations. We need to do something to win. I have to win the next election. So the most important thing in their mind is the constituency, and they have to first survive, which is they have to win elections. And this is where a marketing, hard sell is not hard sell. Savvy of marketing. How do you market an idea such that it seemingly, is for the people, and it also serves the dual purpose of your policy making. Now that's an art many of us learn very quickly, and some of us are a little slower in learning because you have this focus only on systems and on people, but you're not looking at. And when I did do that once or twice, it was instant success. How difficult is it to work? As I said, Chandrapur was one experience, but not all districts are like that. But have I got threats? Once one of my officers came to me and told, madam, that fellow tells me that I will so how will you reach home today? Then another time, it's like, all accidents in Mumbai are not accidents. Are you aware of that? So when I got to hear of this, I actually went and told the concerned minister saying that these threats are being given by somebody I suspect, and would you please call him and warn him? So he says, no, I'll not warn, you do the warning. So I said, if I'm doing the warning, then I do it my way, and then you should not, it may be against your political interests, and please don't, say that I did not warn you. So I called my friend, the police, who happened to be with me in Chandrapur and happened to be heading the intelligence wing of the state government in Maharashtra. He promptly came and did what he had to do. Matter was escalated actually apparently by the police to the chief minister. But the fact is, the way the minister acted was, he was acting under the influence of a coterie of both engineers and his private secretaries. And he actually suffered for it at the end. He lost his portfolio. But it's not that you get a threat every day. They're very, very smart. Okay, they will know, for example, they know their resources very well. Excellent managers. The most achieved politicians are excellent managers. I will not name this politician. Very, very senior. He's like a Bhishma Pitamaha in Maharashtra. But the way he knew his officers was, okay, this one is efficient. I will get the work done out of him or her. This one is very clean, so he or she is the image of my government. And this one is corrupt, fine. I will just get work done out of them, but they have to share. Now I'm sharing this is a responsible, old story, but this is how they use the officers, and and you realize when you become a senior officer yourself, how you use your resources without passing judgment on who is what, because you need to get your work done. And the other thing is, you are not asked to change your basic characteristics. A person who wants to be honest is not asked to make money, and a person who's making money is not really asked to stop but to help the people. So very, very interesting insights that I got early in my life. Now, coming to the last part of my talk is we are talking about crisis management, right? This COVID, managing COVID is actually a crisis management. But I want to give two examples to show that my experience that Indian government seems to work best in crisis situations. I used to wonder whether it is the weather in most parts of the country which prevents you from working, 360 days at the same pace with the same effectivity. So elections, it's incredible when the elections are announced how everybody gets into it and they are serious about it. And there are no two ways about it. So till I became a district magistrate and collector, I have not conducted an election. And when I started, and as district magistrate, I had to conduct 2 parliamentary elections, 1 assembly election, corporate election, local body election, everything. The first election was a parliamentary election. And I wasn't sure how I was going to manage because I did not have experience in this. You have a great team, yes, but half of them were missing. They were loafing. They would come to office at 11 o'clock. They would disappear. It's a big office. You don't keep track of them. And suddenly I find some unknown faces showing up. I said, but who are you? He says, ma'am, I'm also deputy collector in the office. I said, where were you? What were you doing? Very sheepish grin. He says, I was outside. I said, so what makes you come back suddenly? He says, no, this is elections. Very proud. I have to conduct election. It's a constitutional duty, There you go. Perfect elections. When the materials were distributed, I was amazed to see how it's distributed. It's much like, a Maharashtrian or a South Indian wedding, which is laid out on a banana leaf and each one comes and puts that one item. So that's how it's put. There is right down to a stapler, staple pins, and this is a string to tie just about everything. It's amazing clockwork, which you will never see on a daily situation. Then the second instance where I realized this is when we had the Latur earthquake and how the entire administration got together. There were earthquakes around that time in other parts of the world. There were disasters in other parts of the world. And here you were, I believe the World Bank at that time actually commented that the earthquake which happened in Japan, more systemic country, was not as well handled as the Latur earthquake. So once again, crisis, everybody comes together, right? And there were no, it's also the public. The public also cooperates at the time of a crisis. If you have we had that war in J&K and everybody came together and what mattered was India. We have this COVID, everybody comes together. So in terms of crisis and disaster situations, it's actually the people give their best and there is no looting and dacoity during those times, amazingly. Now, a last piece about COVID. How are we dealing with it? I happened to, a batchmate of mine who's secretary and heading a task force in the government of India happened to share a presentation with me. Basically, they had looked at how the virus was panning out in different parts of the world, especially Western Europe and US and even Australia, Japan, etc. And they had looked at 4 or 5 theories and done a simulation study. And as per the simulation study, what was shared with me was that it was going to peak mid-May in Mumbai and beginning June in Maharashtra, the rest of Maharashtra. But as it happens, one of the assumptions in that presentation was that there will be a doubling of positive cases once every 3.8 days. But the present doubling is closer to 7 to 7.3 days. So this flattening this peaking will not happen in May as I see it. It's mid-May. It's going to happen earliest is end May. So we have a long way to go. But as all of you would have read and known, I think this is actually delaying the flattening and not eliminating the problem and giving us time to see how best we can upgrade our health infrastructure in both Maharashtra, in Mumbai as well as Maharashtra. Now there are some excellent, what we call frontline workers, and frontline workers are not just doctors and health workers, but it also includes people like patwaris, talatis, even engineers, junior engineers, electricity officers, who are in the front line fighting it out, because it's not something that only doctors can do. In fact, the frontline workers who work in the field have a responsibility to ensure that there is more prevention so that the health workers are not overloaded. So we have some excellent examples of, as you can see, Kasargod. There were 116, this is a district in Kerala, 169 cases and 0 deaths now. They did testing, they used technology, because Kerala had developed this technology based on their previous disaster management events, foolproof contact tracing, and effective public campaigns. Pathanamthitta used technology, screening every person who entered the district. They traced the travel route of every positive case. Self-reporting was the norm. And they also used this excellent network called Kutumbashri, which is a network which was formed by Kerala about 10-20 years ago, of some women self-help groups. And they came forth immediately, and lockdown, yes, but they actually opened community kitchens to make sure everybody got food. Then all of us have read about Bhilwara, where there was complete isolation from the word go. And they found that this is one doctor, and one positive case of this doctor had, and they traced 5,000 contacts that this doctor came across. 30 lakh households were contacted by more than 2,000 beings. They were tested. They were given the term Corona fighters, Corona warriors, Corona captain, etc. And I believe the collector actually organized a door-to-door survey to see how much vegetable, milk, and essential supplies, oil, sugar, etc. each family used in 15 days, and actually arranged for that quantum to be supplied to each dish. Now that, I think, is unheard of meticulous preparation. Then you have Agra, where they identified the epicenters and they did the mapping and put a special task force. And Islampur is a town in Sangli district of Maharashtra, where the first cases came by because they landed in Mumbai and then they traveled to Sangli, and this is a period when the COVID was not recognized as that period. But they had a district response team, they put a containment zone, and there 7,000 population, 0 cases at the moment. So I think these are the frontliners, and in relation to this, I will share with you after this presentation an article written by a colleague of mine on how frontline workers are doing their best, not just during COVID, but throughout the time. Now, yesterday I was listening in on Ashwin Natarajan's talk, and I remember at one point he said that well, there was a police officer who was encouraging him in his startup, and then once a police officer left, he was left in a limbo. But he said that there was no help coming from bureaucrats, and he was wondering whether it was attributable to corruption or to something else. And I would say it is both. Let's accept it. Now, I'll tell you corruption. For example, I'm now on the government-appointed board of the Infrastructure Leasing and Finance Services Company Limited, ILFS. And I had to go to a state government where they had a joint venture to talk to the chief secretary and say that can you give us the royalty that is due to us? So there was a formal talk. I knew the chief secretary personally, and they said they have a financial crisis, so they won't be able to. This was a couple of months back before any of this COVID started. So they won't be able to do it. Now, post meeting in the negotiations, also it was indicated that there are other problems. And having worked in government, I didn't want to actually explore and see what are the problems. I could imagine a myriad of problems that they would have had. But then when I came back and somebody told me, ma'am, I said, is there a problem with the quality of the roads or quality of whatever infrastructure was done? She says, no, in fact, they are the best roads in the state. They still stand after 10 years. Very low maintenance, but that is the problem. The PWD engineers are asking, what's in it for us if there is no problem of maintenance. If there's no maintenance, what do we get out of it? And there lies the real mystery of why the royalty is not being given. Now, there are other legal non-corruption issues which are at play. Very often I found in each of my positions, there would be excellent innovations, very good companies, both Indian as well as foreign, who would come and say, we have this path-breaking invention and we'd like to try it out. Yes, the ministers would take meetings and I've been told several times, बहुत अच्छा है, इसको करना है. And also we say, yeah, करना है, but कैसे करना है? Because we are left with the rules starting from about a decade or two ago, emanating from nothing less than the Vigilance Commission, saying that your procurement process has to follow this route. Until such time, I remember as a younger officer, if somebody came like that, I would say, yeah, why don't we give a pilot project to this person and get it done in this place? And depending on that, then we can do it commercially. The pilot projects were always allowed, and you take it in a small scale, in a smaller place. And there was a leeway given for failure also, could not be pulled up. So two things which have happened in recent times is one, this vigilance commissions, and therefore it's come into law also, procurement process. It has to follow the procurement process, which means price discovery in the market. Nobody can do an MOU with anybody, however great the invention is, and however, even at no cost, even if the person says, I will give it at zero cost, because history has it that they get it at zero cost and after that they go to court. Or the procurement is not possible without without this price discovery, even for public sector companies now. Say let the state and the government and the central public sector companies also participate in this market discovery and price discovery in the market, and then we can say we can give them a 5% margin, but even that is ruled out. So that is one of the reasons that these two things are not being tried. The police are able to try it a little bit. Now, in emergency situations like what we have now, it will be tried, but not in a normal situation. The other reason for not being able to encourage such things is the officer, says, I will take a chance and it's in the best interest of the public. So let's try it. And God forbid, one, if it fails, then there is an inquiry saying, how did you do this? And then they dig not only into this, they'll dig all the way into your past and say, what other decisions were taken by this officer during the tenure in this post? And then you are facing, instead of doing development work, you're facing too much music.
Only 4 minutes, huh?
Yeah, no, I'm finishing. This is my last sentence. Okay. So then, and even if it succeeds, if there is a complaint and then goes to court, then you're dragged into it. So then the officer says, best is just go by the rules, play by the rules. And this playing by the rules is causing a lot of, hindrance to actually trying out new things. So this was actually what I wanted to end with. I pretty much finished what I want to say. I hope there will be some interesting interaction.
There is one question from.
Can I move away from this?
You close the slide. Share the screen. Remove that so you can see everybody. You can close that share screen.
I'll just close the slide.
I don't think close that. Switch.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a question from G. Veer Mahinder. Few insights on ILFS, how it is. I'm interested as I'm working for infrastructure financing company.
That few insights is obviously lack of corporate governance. And ILFS is not the sole company. As we are seeing in recent times, there are several other companies which have got into that problem. Lack of corporate governance on the part of the company, lack of I think delayed reaction from the regulatory bodies, which is understandable from time to time. But as far as ILFS is concerned, if I can spend 3-4 minutes on it, I think it was a necessity. 1990, India had liberalized and they neither had the money, the financial resources, the tax base was very low, nor did they have an idea of how a PPP is to be designed. So in comes ILFS. Initial responsibility was to design a PPP in such a way it's profitable for both the private party and beneficial to the public and the government at large. So they were supposed to actually syndicate funds, design PPP projects, and be the project management company. But in due course, they expanded to be the implementer. Now, once that happened, they were both borrowing, they were lending, and they formed several companies. When I joined, we found that there were 347 companies to be precise, of which about 167 companies were registered as Indian companies and the rest were foreign companies. So this multitude of companies, and then there was in short, an asset liability mismatch. They were borrowing short short term, and actually the road, especially the road projects, were going long term. They, I think, depended on their model of the East Coast Road, which went from Madras to Pondicherry, which was done in flat 1 year or 16 months or something, and then to recover the toll and start taking new ones. But when they took the roads in other parts of the country, they could not even get the possession or ownership of the land. And that delay, that caused both time overrun as well as cost overrun, and then they started defaulting. But having said that, within the company, they did not have a system, whether it was deliberate or otherwise, to have a centralized repository of how much money is going where. And the companies were lending to each other. There are also some, there was misgovernance also, on which we will not dwell now. But the insight is corporate governance, restraint, an asset liability mismatch. And of course, the role of independent directors are being debated a lot in the corporate sector now. And we can see when the government reacts to it, it goes to another extreme and says that, in such a way that no individual wants to take up the independent directorship. Work in progress.
The question of Sandeep and Natarajan are similar. The question is, in your view, apart from the stimuli provided by the RBI, what are the steps that can be taken by the government of India to push economic growth post-COVID? I'm clubbing both the questions.
I think they are doing their best. I read an article somewhere in the Business Standard which said, right now, the situation is such that the government needs, to be bailed out. The government's financial position is so weak that there is nothing that can be done. But yes, I think the way there's somewhere that I read that they are not looking, they are not looking at MSMEs. Mr. Shankar Sharma the other day said MSMEs will die. Now that gave me a real freaking emotion within myself, saying India want employment, it's MSMEs which give employment, not the larger. But I think giving money to, but the point is, how do you give money to MSME? From the government viewpoint, let me play the devil's advocate. If I give money, what is the guarantee that it will not be pocketed by the owner or the proprietor or the manager and not go to the lowest level? And if I give it straightforwardly, if I put it into the, the bank of the employee, what is the guarantee that they will not take it and then still want to go back home? There are challenges. This macroeconomics is too complex for me to, be outside government and to contemplate. But I think giving some, I think they've told the RBI to give loans to MSME, but whether they will give, I'm not sure. I have a feeling they're going to be reluctant because of the counting entries.
There is this question from Himanshu Garg to follow for what regarding ILFS. He says that if same thing continues, like company the highly leveraged misappropriation, then why don't we see a legislation or regulation to avoid these situations?
I think the Ministry of Corporate Affairs is looking at it. They keep amending the laws. If you notice, they keep continuous amending of the IBC Act, and they are amending this. But ultimately, I think corporate governance is our commitment. How much can you, it's like, look at COVID. You say lockdown, you have to be inside the home. But you also have to be practical, saying, how do you implement this being inside the home? There's a huge population in Mumbai which is not inside the home and cannot afford to be inside the home. So you can't envisage every single micro point and say and form rules and regulations for that. Ultimately, I think the corporate sector has to, and Mr. Kotak tells us that he says yes, we have to meet, both ends have to meet, and the corporate sector also has to internalize and introspect as to what they should do to contribute. So laws, yes, they are looking at it, but when they make laws, there's also a criticism saying government is being over-regulating. Government is tightening things too much. So I think regulation is not the way forward. Maybe that's why, for elections, for example, you have only a model code of conduct. And that's what drives the whole elections. There is no law. It's not justiciable. Model code of conduct is just a code of conduct. So I think there needs to be a code of conduct for corporates also.
Question from Vivek Kejriwal. As an officer like district magistrate or collector, you might have to address multiple stakeholders. Some tips on stakeholder management.
Listen to them. Listen to them. Meet them, listen to them. Because very often I've felt, for example, we shift jobs every 2 years, 3 years, maybe less sometimes. So it's not necessary, and you're not having a training for each of these positions or assignments. And you get only about 15, 30 days to grasp what is there and to run it. And sometimes you're there in the middle of the crisis. For example, I was posted as irrigation secretary, first IS officer to be posted in Maharashtra after 40 years. It was always held by technocrats. And there was a great irrigation scam in Maharashtra, right? And there was nobody, there was no institutional memory. There was nobody from the technocrats who was going to tell me and share with me what's the insights. So the only way to do it was to meet as many people as possible right in the beginning and talk to them. And meet them sometimes in your office. But I was told once, one of the things that I was given as a young officer is, when somebody comes to your office, they may not tell the truth. They come with a problem and you just have to address it formally. If you go to them and have a cup of tea, they will open up and tell you lots more. And this actually I have experienced. As a SEZ, heading the SEZ, I would go and sit with a manager or the proprietor, have a cup of tea, say, I never came for anything. They would open up. This is like international negotiations. Most negotiations don't take place in the hall. They take place in the corridor, right? Meet them. For example, in irrigation, I said, okay, now no one's going to tell me. Let me go into the interior and sit there for overnight, to a night hall. So I went to this place called Bembla, which is Yavatmal on the border of Telangana once again. And at 11 o'clock at night, I got a knock on the door. And when I opened the door, I saw these 3 men, obviously villagers. They've trekked for miles together. They've come there. They said, Madam, Baisab, and Bolaitsa, nobody is listening to us. We thought you'll listen. And we said, we'll come and talk to you. 11 p.m. I said, if they have taken the trouble and they have taken the trouble to come meet me at this time and they've trekked so long, let me give them a cup of tea and you will have the whole story. And very often they give you the solution also. You might get 10 solution offers, but you will have to see opposing forces, which is the better one to pick up. But not stakeholder meeting, like, I've taken the meeting. This happens in many offices. I've taken the meeting and I've recorded it and it is a checklist which is completed. No, actually talk to them, and sometimes individually. Does that answer the question?
Hayes has asked a question. He says, now, I think this question is relevant because Goa has opened up, right? So is there anything one can do? For example, the MHA says one thing and a sarpanch or policeman in some places rule differently for obvious reason, camouflaged in greater good.
This is one of the most difficult things in government is when an order is issued at the headquarters, center, state, district, wherever, and the last mile, how it understands it and interprets it and implements it. Implementation is what the public sees, but sometimes it is the understanding and the interpreting which is at fault. And I think this one is a very, very common problem. How the last man in that supply chain or the chain interprets it. It's a real problem. And I think it is the only way to do it, and it cannot be done in an emergency, is we've done it. We call all of them, ask them to read it, ask them to interpret it, ask them to ask questions. There are collectors doing this. For example, in Andhra Pradesh, there's a police officer who did it. And he was criticized because he called all of them to one place and they were not wearing masks. But that's an aside. So, and there are officers. The article that I have sent to you, Nikhil, is by an officer who was known for that. He would issue an order and he would just talk to a sample of the people who were supposed to implement the order to understand whether they have interpreted it correctly. But otherwise, yes, the last man he cannot reach his superiors very easily. So please, not to blame him also. Sometimes they are what you call in Marathi, hatta darun bastat, but adamant. But most of the time, it's because they just can't. They think they interpret it, in such a way that it is a tight interpretation, so that they'll not be pulled up in the future.
Ashwin Natarajan has a question. He says, with respect to innovation, can government come up with a policy for every department at a state or central level, wherein small amount of funds are available and the public servants who are decision makers can then deploy to bring forth innovation? Even in progressive government programs such as Karnataka's Elevate program, real innovations are not given their due recognition. I mean, yesterday we talked about its dividers and that. So
that is why I addressed that, saying the rules are a problem, but I think there's been a recommendation given by many officers to the central government, saying I think the central government has also formed a task force on innovation, and the recommendation is that a certain amount of funds is allocated for testing out these innovations in the field. That is a recommendation, but the two impediments still stand. That if I take that decision and it fails, what will happen to me? And if there is a opposition to that, because there are very many, they're black, there are dark people all over the place, and their whole job is to see when they can go to court and bring down somebody else. There's corporate competition or enmity which makes this happen. So I think this one of the biggest detriments in government has been this thing, how to deal with corruption and how to assume presumption that this officer is corrupt and arrest the officer immediately. This issue of arresting somebody immediately has to be. So, but yes, the government is working on this innovation fund.
One question from Jinesh Shah. Any comment stroke solution on powerful corporates hijacking regulators or regulatory capture by corporates?
I think I will excuse myself from this by just admitting that I don't have the bandwidth to answer this immediately.
Question from Abhijit Khalke. Given your experience in the water sector, what are your thoughts on the water situation in the country? We read reports about cities like Bangalore running out of water completely. Does the government have the political will to treat it as a resource and price it accordingly?
Okay, now if you look at the whole country, there are several states which are water starved. Now, the government has unified all the water related ministries at the central level and formed the Jal Shakti ministry, and they have a Jal Shakti Abhiyan by which they will deliver water to every single habitation by 2024. That's for the whole country. If it comes to cities, I think demand management is the call of the need of the day, and demand management asks for charging water. There are states which believe that water is a common good, it's a social good, it is an economic good, of course, but most importantly, it is what I would consider a political good and emotional good. People get very emotional about water. People get very, and politics is played on water. We are aware of that. But whenever we want to raise, there are states like Maharashtra which have said people have to pay for water. It is an economic good. It can be political, social, but it is an economic good. Maharashtra charges for the water. But the charging is not, there are several things along the way which hamper this. One is metering is not mandatory. So can we make metering mandatory? Why are we not making metering mandatory? They say the meters are ineffective. But the industry says, but if you make it mandatory, there will be competition, you'll get better metering. It will be like electricity. So I can save the water also. It's part of demand management. The second thing is, when you tell the politician, he will say, Madam, log bharenge nahi. Which is also true. If you go, people will have cell phones in their hands and 200 rupees per month those days, but they will not pay 50 rupees for water. But there has come a time when people are willing to pay if the service is right, and I think the only way to go ahead is to ensure that it is metered and it is tariff. Now, whenever there is a water shortage, people will say, yeah, I'm willing to pay even 4 times, 5 times. But then a place like Mumbai and Konkan is an assured rainfall area, and the minute it rains, they will say we are not paying. Now, there was one time I was addressing a group of Rotary Club people, and this is in a very posh area in Mumbai. And I told them, can you save electricity also? Can you save water? I was working in the Electricity Regulatory Commission. I said, can you save water? They said, they almost went for my jugular and said, you came to talk about electricity, don't talk about water. The point is, are we aware that this water from Mumbai is pumped at multiple pumping stages from 300 kilometers, as far as 300 kilometers away. So if you save your water, you actually save your electricity. That was a time electricity was in short supply. But yes, metering and tariffing are very, very important. And the earlier we recognize it, is better because it will help you save the water. There is enough water, for example, in Mumbai. There is enough water in Bangalore. What is the issue is demand management.
Okay, a question from Darshan Ganguly. I had put in that only 2 questions, but my batchmate has himself asked 2 questions. Very smart. Okay. Since you brought out the ALM issue in infrastructure funding, what has the government done to initiate a market for longer tenor debts for 20-25 years? Even today, most debt is only available up to 10 to 12 years. 2, why do we have no municipal bond market even after so many smart cities coming up?
Number one, you remember why IDBI was formed? It was for infrastructure development. Then you had IFBC. This was for infrastructure development. But at some point, I don't know why it was converted into retail banking and non-infrastructure banking. So now I don't see government bringing infrastructure back into a banking system unless they can reconvert IDBI into infrastructure bank alone. There is not enough money going around in private or public sector at the moment. The longer term, I think government is saying, please give for a longer term. It's for the banks, and the banks, public sector banks are saying, no, our NPAs are too high, and private sector banks say, we don't have money and the return on the investment is not much. The return on investment is a question. Infrastructure funding is available. But on paper, most of the projects which come are very good. The return on investment is 16%, 18%, 12%, etc. But in practice, somewhere it's got siphoned off, or perhaps it's overstated. Classic example is toll roads. I have actually seen tolls saying, this is a number of vehicles which go every day, and this is a toll we can charge just 10 rupees, and we'll be fine, and we'll do payback period is over in 15 years. And then you find that the number of vehicles is overstated, and the payback period increases forever. So much to be said on both sides. The second one was on. Sorry, I got.
No, you asked. No, there are many more questions, and Darshan is in our Mumbai group. I'll give you his number. But there are other questions which I'll forward to you. Darshan, don't mind, because he's my batchmate, so I can take that. Okay. There are questions. Just Manish has said, hi, what is your view on IAS post tenure to be increased to 5 years instead of just 3 years? Do you think it can make them work more efficiently? That is one question. Okay. Second is from Harivardhan Kuna. Do you see the lift irrigation as a viable solution in a country like yours?
I'll answer the lift irrigation first.
Yeah, and one more question, and one more, because Manish, again, you can talk to him, we can talk one on one.
Yeah, of course.
And one more question is, Madam, there has been, this is from Prerit Sood. Madam, there has been huge Sagarmala project budget sanctioned 2 years back by Government of India for ports and shipping modernization. When could we approximately see the impact on ground versus China? You answer Sood and Harivardhan. Manish and Darshan, excuse me.
Okay, lift irrigation, sometimes it is the only way out, and they are trying it, for example, to lift water in Tapi River to give it to the drought-prone areas of Maharashtra. The same thing is being attempted in a very, very, very large scale in the huge project in Telangana by the Chief Minister of Telangana. In fact, there's an interesting story to this. I remember there was an interstate meeting between the Telangana Chief Minister and Maharashtra Chief Minister when I was Water Resources Secretary. And Telangana Chief Minister, among the briefing that he gave, he says, Telangana was not found for territorial gain. It was found because we find Krishna and Godavari passing through Telangana and flowing into Andhra, but we don't get the benefits of it. Anyway, back to this lift irrigation. It is possible, but is it affordable? Technically, it's possible. But the cost of pumping and depends on how far you're pumping and how high you're pumping and how much you're pumping. And if you see this cost, we are not sure that the Telangana government project can actually be sustainable. It will never be self-sustainable, but can it be cross-subsidized is a question. But some areas, if the people are dying, in fact, there are few points of why should you supply water to them? Can you not shift the population nearer the water? That's also something which gets debated in the irrigation area. Now, Sagarmala, I think there are certain things which are already in place, and this is not something where you say there are some 200 plus projects, which talks about ports, which talks about privatization, talks about coastal shipping, etc. So this is not something you will see end at some point. It is an ongoing process. Some of them, coastal shipping is taking place, if connectivity is increasing, if, for example, even cruise shipping is taking place. There are 350 cruise ships which visited just Mumbai Port Trust in 1 year, last year. So it's taking place. Those are all results of Sagarmala. If they continue to fund it as planned, I think 2022 they will be able to achieve the whole thing. But that's going to be affected by a financial crisis at this moment. And a very brief to Manish, because the tenure of 3 to 5 years, there is no fixed tenure. Some states have a board, civil services board, which gives a tenure. But frankly, I've had a median tenure of 1 year and 7 months. 5 years is too long for a state government. 5 years and the tenure for a central government posting is 4 years and 5 years, depending on your seniority. I think if we get minimum 1 year and 9 months, we can achieve what you can do. It's quite, 2 years is quite good actually. And as I said, you learn in the first 15 days, and if you're savvy enough, you start implementing certain projects and set some systems right. Last word before, what I forgot to say was those 5 districts where I said they have actually contained the virus problem in a more effective way. Kerala, for example, and around the world, if you look at Germany, even Sri Lanka, some of the districts, there's a common thread running across all this. These are the states, countries, districts which have focused on access to health and built up their health infrastructure, by which I mean not just buildings and equipment, but also people. The amount of effort that has gone in the last 20 years in Kerala and Tamil Nadu is something which is not parallel to the rest of the country. I've seen it in action when I was posted in Tamil Nadu, and I've heard about it in Kerala. So I think while we talk about infrastructure as in coastal road and airports and modernized flyovers, everything, we as citizens need to ask for infrastructure in public health, public transport, public safety.
Okay, now that you've answered, Manish, I have to be fair. You answered Darshan's question of why there are no municipal bonds, even though smart cities.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the last question.
The municipal bonds was something which was actually floated some 20 years back and did not fare well. And from what I read, there are no takers for it, because I don't think we believe that the municipalities and corporations will actually be effective in implementing these bonds and giving a return, modicum of return to the government or to the public. Its time has come, but it's not right. But it's not come. It's both ways. But that is I don't think the time is right for
that. Thanks, Malini. I just want to acknowledge the presence of Professor Domingo with us.
Yes.
Thanks,
thank
Prof.
you. Thank you.
Prof, I hope you got a preview of what is there tomorrow.
Yes, very interesting interaction. I like it. I like it.
My job is a little difficult, but I have to be the headmaster.
Yeah. And thank
You're
you so
doing a
much.
great job.
Thank you so much, Nikhil, and thanks each one of you who took the Sunday afternoon off to
Thank
be
you.
here. And
Thank you. Thanks, Malini, for a very nice, lucid presentation. Blaze had put a question. Please name some corporates, but but still, I purposely did not want it to bring up that. So that goes. But thank you very much for your what do you say, bebakpana without naming, and we know who's the Bhishma Pitama without you naming it. Okay. So thanks a lot, and thanks, guys.
And I hope it was interesting to everybody.
I mean, we could have gone for it. There were many more questions on WhatsApp also for me, but then
Part two.
Part two. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nikhil. Thank you.